Hello everyone. Recently, while I was making my latest video, I decided to look over Undertale's art book and see if I could find anything interesting. And oh boy did I find some interesting stuff. Stuff I don't think anyone has even mentioned before, and to be honest, some stuff that shocked me. But before I go into the big theory stuff, I'm going to start off with a few smaller stuff I found interesting. But before all that, spoilers for Undertale I guess? And consider subbing if you like my content, it really means a lot. Anyway, back to the video. Oh, and one thing of note before I start the video, this art book is mostly filled with unused stuff / concept arts. Though I have my own theories about the content of this book in general, I don't like to use unused stuff for my theories, or at least scrapped content, as the main evidence for theories. I usually only like to use it as supporting evidence. So whether you agree with what I say or not, you can have your own speculation as to whether it's canon or not. But while I believe some of what I will be talking about might not be canon, I feel like some of what I'm saying can hold their weight even if they're unused content. Okay, now on to the video. Okay, first off, some stuff you might have seen before, like how you can see in this demo / unreleased version the player is named Chara. If you're at all familiar with Undertale, you would know why that's important. Nothing really further to say on this. I'm not going to explain the entire lore significance of Chara or anything like that, I just thought it was interesting. Okay, on to the next one. My next observation was about the Deltarune, and it's everywhere in this book. Here's a few of them now. Now, I wouldn't say this is weird, but it's very interesting that we see it so much. I mean, we see it a lot during the actual game, but by the looks of it, it was planned that we'd see it a lot more throughout the game. Though there's one I would like to point at as especially interesting, and it's this one. As you can see here, it says it's a scrapped cave concept, which overall is pretty cool, but if you look over here, do you see it? Not only is there what looks like a Deltarune, but it looks like an angel or angel-like thing is under it, which I think is interesting. The whole Deltarune and Undertale's prophecy is very closely tied together, and usually it's kind of depicted more simplistically, with this representing the angel in the prophecy, but it looks like it was going to be more expressive, I guess, or representative by a literal angel, which I thought was interesting. There are two more things of note I should also mention about this drawing. One you may have seen, there's the snake and monster-like thing fighting next to the Deltarune. I don't know what this means or if it means anything at all, but it kind of reminded me of the art in Temmie Village. I don't know, it might be just me. Secondly, on the bottom right next to the snowman there's a flower, probably Flowey. You know how in the game if you turn back at certain points you can see Flowey following you. I think this would have been very similar, where you could only see them for a split second. There are also a few more examples of Deltarunes I would like to show, but I think that's best left for later. One thing I found pretty weird was on page 40 is that this was called the cousin room, which, like in the game, I believe was its name in the code, since Toby Fox didn't want data miners / hackers to spoil it for people, which okay, I get, but I'm pretty sure anyone who bought this book knows is metatons. Like, maybe I'm looking way too into this, but it seems kinda weird to call it that if basically anyone who's looking at this already knows it's Metatons room. I don't know, just found it kind of weird. On page 77 are some early sprites of Toriel which are cool to look at, but what caught my eye is this one. Doesn't it kind of look like Susie? Or at least if Susie was combined with SCP-682, I don't know. Maybe it's just the brain rot from all my Deltarune / Undertale theorizing, but I can kind of see it. Granted, I know it's not 100% one-to-one, but maybe Toby Fox looked at some older designs to inspire him for the design of Susie. But what do you guys think? I would love to hear your thoughts, so comment them if you have any to share. On page 87 it is mentioned that Bonetrussel, Papyrus's theme, it's said that it was originally meant to be the main battle theme for another game, which is probably Deltarune. Nothing to really say about this, a lot of other people have already covered this, but I thought I'd at least mention it, or other people would say it in the comments. Okay, in my notes that I wrote in as I was looking through this book, I just wrote sans poker and, yeah, it's sans in a poker hat. I don't know why I wrote this, I was like half asleep while looking through this book. I guess it's kinda cool, I guess. I don't know why I made a note of it though. On page 133 we can see a few concept arts of Photoshop/Omega Flowey which are pretty cool designs, but something I found interesting was this, the pink soul which isn't in the normal game, the closest being purple in the game. I think originally the soul was supposed to belong to the ballerina, the one who owned the ballet shoes and old tutu. Now there isn't much more to say about this, it was probably too similar to the purple soul so they just replaced it with another color, though now that I'm saying this, why wasn't the light blue or dark blue soul replaced too then? Anyway, I have a question for you guys, since all the soul types have a battle gimmick, theoretically what do you think the pink soul attack gimmick would have been? I think it would be somewhat similar to the purple one, since they're a somewhat similar color, it would have acted somewhat similar and would have played kind of like the game Snake. Instead of holding down a button to move, you would press a button and would continue to move in that direction. I think that would have been interesting. Also, I'm not going to make a separate note of its own, but on page 141, there's these photo of worms, chains, and bones that went unused in the game, but the weird part is the description of the image. Everdreed says, "I love those worms, don't forget about them." I know that this is probably just a joke and I'm looking too hard into this, but why should we not forget about the worms? When I think about worms, the first thing that comes to mind is Rules card. Could this have been some sort of weird foreshadow to Deltarune? I mean, this wouldn't be the only time that this book foreshadows Deltarune in this book, which I will talk about soon, but this just seems weird is all. Going back a page or two, on page 136 and 7 there's some funny images of Flowey's face that they would have used at the end of the Photoshop Flowey fight, but then there's this one, and, is it me or is that just effing Ralsei? I mean, sure, it could just be Asriel, and it most definitely is, but to me that looks a lot more like Ralsei than Asriel. Anyway, moving on to the next page. 142, where I just found this to be funny tbh, there's this image here where Everdread says, "If I don't say what this is, would people just speculate about it? Would it spark a discussion on what these pixels are? And they just say it's just a house falling down, and here's the death groans of theorize." I thought it was pretty funny, since you know, that's kinda exactly what I'm doing, so I felt a little called out. On page 151 Toby Fox is talking about redesigns of Asriel, and he says that every time someone calls final boss Asriel hot, an angel gets its wings, an angel of death, which, I don't even know where to start. Does that mean the angel of death in Undertale's prophecy is an angel of death or what? I don't know what to make of this, if it means anything at all. Here on page 155 we can see a beta design of Asriel, and what I find interesting is that they were going to have a more robotic design. Not only that, but a yellow heart, which I find interesting. I wonder if the concept of Metaton even existed at this point. I wonder if this scrap design may have influenced the design or even the whole character of Metaton. Something to think about. I guess I don't think it's entirely impossible. Granted, again, it's not 100% one-to-one, but look at the heart and robotic arms, and even on Metaton Neo the wings kind of could be conveyed as angel wings. What do you think? Okay, I have to be honest, up until now I've been kinda pulling my punches till now. I've got one or two more small stuff to go over until I get into the really big stuff, so just bear with me till I get into the really juicy stuff, and trust me, I believe that it will shock you. Okay, on page 156 and 57 we can see some more early designs of Asriel next to the Deltarune. Nothing too interesting, but then I realized something. Why would the Deltarune be next to Asriel? Maybe to influence their design or something. But then I realized something. Okay, theory time. Asriel is the angel. In the angel's prophecy, up until now I feel like most people believe/theorized that Frisk was the angel that would set all the monsters free, by destroying the barrier, and Chara represented the angel of death, setting all the monsters free, by killing all of them. But what if Asriel is actually the angel foretold in the prophecy instead of Frisk as many thought? Thematically it would make a lot more sense for it to be Charaz/Asriel to be the angels foretold in the prophecy rather than Charaz/Frisk, and after all, at the end of True Pacifist it's not you the player who destroys the barrier, it's Asriel that does it. Asriel is the one who sets everyone free, granted it's only because of Frisk that it's all happening, but still. Anyway, that's my theory on the matter, feel free to let me know what you think. Okay, winding down a little bit from that. Trust me, there's a lot more bigger stuff coming up soon. On page 178 there's a very weird description for Everyman, like you know how like everything else has a normal description of it, but Everyman's description is just like in the style of the game when you check a enemy, quote name, Everyman description just a good guy who shows up on occasion, and that's just kinda weird. A side note I would like to mention before moving on, it seems Everyman is popping up a lot in Deltarune, like in the alleyway where you can find Alphys, and also in the Jevil fight, though I don't know if it's just supposed to be sort of a reoccurring Easter egg or something else, like they feel important at least somewhat, but unlike most of the other mysteries things that appear in this game, they seem to have little to no connection to Gaster, apart from maybe them appearing in the True Lab. They're not tied to a fun event or randomly disappear like the rest of Gaster's followers, though I think the most important fact or tidbit is that they appear in both the light and dark world, which we haven't really seen very many people do, really only the Fun Gang and I guess Noel and Berdly, so far that we have seen both in the light and dark that we know of, so the fact we see them both in and out of the dark world is interesting, though I don't know entirely what to make of it. Okay, now onto the Deltarune stuff, which in fact there seems to be a lot of in this, but first off on page 172 there's a certain bird that might look a little familiar, and yup, that's just Berdly, that's 100% Berdly. Apparently its name was Larpy and you had to role play with it to spare it, and I think this 100% was the inspiration for Berdly in Deltarune. Again, a nerdy bird that's slightly annoying describes this and Berdly 100%, though there's even stronger evidence for some Deltarune characters in this book. On page 195 there are these two, and do they look familiar? They're these guys from the Spamton sweepstakes. Granted they are not 100% similar, but they have the same theme of the sun and moon, and just on the next page there's this image which there's only one of but looks a lot closer to this one. This really shocked me because I don't think I've seen anyone talking about this yet. But even more shocking is this image. On this page you have some very basic drawings of some characters, some kind of lion thing and this mouse. But then there's this. What the f is that? That is literally just f***ing Spamton. I mean, just look at that. That is literally just f***ing Spamton, and it even has its name blanked out. That's not me editing it out or anything, that literally just effing Spamton. How? Why? Huh? Why is no one talking about this? This came out like a few years before Deltarune, and no one noticed that he was foreshadowed in this? Like, look at that nose. That mouth and his signature hair, like sure their legs aren't the same, but like holy shit, other than that that's literally Spamton. Like, I can't express how shocked I am at this. Like, how? Why is no one talking about this? I'm going to leave this here for now, but this is big. And my next video will probably be using this as evidence, so try to remember this, but still, like, holy shit. Anyway, one more thing before we move on, going back to the page with the moon on it, and just above it we can very obviously see a swatchling/swatch there, like there isn't very much to talk about this, especially after the last one, but yeah, they're also here, and were foreshadowed too, I guess. But like with all this, I don't know how much of this is reused or foreshadowed, because Toby Fox had to be at least be thinking about making Deltarune before making this to purposefully blank out Spamton's name like that, so I don't know which of the two it is, foreshadowing, or just reusing old ideas. I mentioned this earlier that the player character was named Chara, right? But what I find even more interesting is that that's not the only name they're given. In even earlier in development they were also just called Hero. Now that's not too interesting on its own, but what is this next name they're given, and that's Ness. and if you didn't know is the protagonist of Earthbound. Now again, this isn't too weird. Toby Fox is a big fan of Earthbound, but like, do you see how the name is put there in the background? There's all these jagged lines. Now you might say, yeah, what do you expect, it's just a prototype, and I would agree with you, but look at all the other black lines in the background. They're all very straight lines and rectangles or rectangles on rectangles, while this looks kinda like it was just scribbled over and Ness was put over it. No, I believe this was trying to hide the name of someone. Now it's unlikely that it would be Chara since we've seen their name multiple times already. So it's probably someone who we shouldn't know the name of yet. Then maybe W.D. Gaster? No, I don't think so. Why would the main character be W.D. Gaster? Plus, unless it was just Gaster, I think it would be too long to cover up. No, what I think was their original name was in fact Chris. Think about it. One, it's 4 letters just like Ness, so it could be easily covered up. Plus, it's not the only potential Deltarune reference in this image. Granted, it's probably a bit of a stretch, but the hero's weapon is called the Planet Buster, which is very similar to Susie's Rude Buster. So I think originally their name would have been Chris the hero in quotation marks and used the Planet Buster like Susie does in Deltarune. Plus, I would like to mention one more thing before I move on. If I am right that this was blanked out and covered up with Ness, the only things that are also blacked out in this book are 1, swears, and 2, stuff relating to Deltarune like their names, just like how Spamton's name was. That's most of what I found interesting throughout the book, but before I go, I would like to share one more thing before I end this video. Now I just want to be honest, I don't think this theory means anything in the large scheme of things, or is really important to the plot of Deltarune or Undertale at all. I just think it's interesting to think about. A lot of early concept art in this book has one thing in it that I found kinda interesting, and that's the amount of stars in the images. And here on page 17 on an early design of Asriel's room it says this: at the time, I thought he might have an interest in the outside world, so I suggested giving him a astronomy-themed mobile, and this gets me into my mini theory. I think that stars at least originally were made to represent the above ground, the surface. Now this is not only supported by the concept art but even a little bit in the game. Again, going back to this image, you can see that it looks like the human is just entering the underground with the star just above the door representing the surface that they just came from, and again just entering the beginning of the game there's the star again, and remember in Waterfall these rocks on the ceiling were there to represent the surface, and the wish to one day see them again. Again, I don't think this means anything for the wider DT/UT universe. This is just a little theory meant to round off the video, but I have 1 or 2 more things to say about this before I go. Number 1, not only could the star have represented the surface world but even be a predecessor to the Deltarune itself. Again, going back to this image, granted I know there's very little evidence for this, but it looks like the star was replaced with the Deltarune in the final game. Though there isn't a lot of evidence for my star theory, I still kinda like it though, but that's basically all I have for today. So overall there are a lot of interesting stuff in here for both theorists and casual fans of the series, and I think if you like Toby's work you should definitely go check the book out, because there's a lot of interesting and cool stuff in this book that I didn't even cover. So yeah, that's pretty much all for this video. My next video will be somewhat similar to this. I don't know what I will be calling it though, probably something like a handful of theories, or something like that, which will be 4 or 5 theories that couldn't be made into their own videos on their own, because it would probably be too short. But surprisingly, one of the theories I had for the video can be supported by some stuff in this book, and I've already started working on the script. So yeah, that's all for this video. Consider liking and subbing if you like my content, and check out my other videos if you haven't already. And yes, see you in the next one, which hopefully will be out soon. So have a good day. Goodbye.